Um, oh, hello, Eileen, how are you? Good to see you. Evie, Lauren, great to see you. People are slowly but surely coming in. We're at the top of the hour, but we'll leave it for a bit, obviously, for people to drop by. Bard, how are you? I'll say what I always say. Mary, good to see you. Pat, how are you? I'll say what I always say. It would be so nice if we were in a room, in a hotel, and doing this face-to-face, and then looking forward to a glass of wine afterwards in the bar, and actually being together, because I think we're all a bit bored of Zoom, but thank goodness we have it. You know, thank goodness we have it. Rob, did you want to chip in there?
I just want to say, goodbye. I don't want to be on Zoom anymore.
Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. It's great to have you here. We've got quite a lot of people signed up today, so we'll give it a few more minutes. Thank you very much indeed to my fantastic panel today, and specifically to Tracy and to Lucy for putting this together. How do we define the value of wellness as part of a mobility program? That is a meaty topic, because we've always looked at, within Eura, the sessions that we run, and how to look at the conference content, and things always seem to get separated into hard topics and soft topics, and this is not a soft topic. And if one thing to me has come out of COVID, which is going to be good, is placing this issue at the center of mobility programs. So I will shut up. Tracy, I'll hand over to you. Thank you again, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, Dom. Hello, everyone. Tracy, Stuart Kautzmann. I work with the Impact Group. It's a coaching company, but for the mobility industry, we are most known for our partner support as well as our cross-cultural coaching. And I'm going to ask Lucy, ladies first, to introduce herself.
So, hello everyone, I'm Lucy Foster. I also work with Impact Group with Tracy. I am the Global Account Manager, and I'm also one of our international career and transition and cross-cultural coaches.
Rob?
Hi, I'm Rob Fletcher. I'm one of the co-founders of Heart Relocation, relatively new relocation management company, been in existence for not quite 2 years. And started at the start of a global pandemic, which was an interesting time to start an organization focused on wellness.
And Damian.
Thank you. Very nice to see everyone. I'm Damian Porter. I work at William Russell, and we offer healthcare insurance, life insurance and income protection for all products focused to expats living and working all around the world. And my job at the company is to set up affiliate partnerships with relocation companies, DSPs, immigration providers, tax providers, where they are referring their clients to us, and we're paying out very generous commissions. So it's something I've been doing for the last 6 months, and I shall look forward to talking more about that as we go on.
Thanks. Dom, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit more than you usually do?
That's very sweet. Hi, I'm Dom Tidy. I've worked with Eura now for 20 plus years. Ooh. And I've got to tell you, it is an amazing industry that we work in. I have to say, I'm doing a very different job to the one that I was doing 16, 18 months ago, but it's just been amazing to see how the Eura members have pulled together and can continue to support each other and communicate. So I am eternally grateful to be able to do what I do.
Yes, and we're grateful for you, Dom. And I don't know if you guys knew, but I didn't know that Dom has a law degree.
I do have
I just found that out on LinkedIn, and I was like, wow.
Yeah, I do. I never did anything with it. I got to the end of my law degree, and I have to say, it was really hard work. And I was house sharing with friends who were doing things like history of art and English literature. They were having a really lovely time, and I was just studying them all the time. But yes, I did. That's really sweet.
Well, to get back into the topic of today, and I have to say our panelists are just as excited and passionate about this topic as I am. I think most of you know that employees and family well-being and duty of care has really been pushed a lot since the start of this pandemic. So I think this is a time for opportunity for us to really discuss this deeper. We all have had a year of change in the mobility industry, from remote working, virtual assignments, travel bans, lots of visa restrictions, and then there's been the whole family health concern that's really taken a toll, and that's why we're looking forward to hearing more from Damian on that side as well. We quoted this on our description. Access World of Work Mind Health Report 2020 cited that 1/5 of the international assignees have encountered mental health difficulties in their current placement, and 2/5 agreed that living and working in a country puts strain on their family life. You know, so we're hearing from RMCs, international corporates, that this is impacting retention, performance, productivity, and ultimately really more anxious about the success of the assignment. And so as a result, we're seeing, all of us on this panel, that our clients are considering employee well-being a whole different level, a deeper level than they used to. And really that's to encourage their talent to take the international assignment and retain and develop that talent on assignment and after. So this panel really wants to dive into what that means for us global mobility providers and experts leading and reviewing policies and providing our expertise, our knowledge to these client companies that we're working for. And so this is what this panel is about, and I hope you learn a little bit from it and take out some good ideas from it. So just to remind you of something, I will be looking at the chat every once in a while, or the Q&A. So if I look like I'm texting, I'm not. I'm just actually looking at the chat feature. So just want to apologize if that's what it looks like. So before we dive into the best practices, proposed solutions, thought leadership from all of you panelists, I actually want to ask you, each one of you, what does well-being mean to you? So Rob, how about you start?
So it's one of those questions that you could spend an hour answering on its own. And I think we all now talk about the pandemic having changed things, but actually well-being should and has always been very central to the success or failure of an assignment. And a success or failure isn't as simple as did they stay or did they go. There are increments of failure that need to be kind of thought about. And if you think about what as human beings we do to other human beings when we send them from one place in the world to another, we layer in all kinds of stresses, which on their own as individual stress points, probably most people could deal with fairly comfortably, but we layer in multiple layers of stress points. And if you refer back to the Holmes Race scale, which kind of gives each change of food, change of diet, change of house a score, regularly we put assignees in over 300, which puts them at significant risk of a stress-related illness. So well-being, has been around for a long time, but I think it's more than that. I think we think about relocation in terms of physical, and what we really should be doing is thinking about it in terms emotional. The physical movement of goods and people and getting people places in houses and schools is really important. But what about their emotional journey on a relocation? And I think that has been given very little thought. And even when companies have created spousal support programs, I hate the word, but we have to keep using it because everybody recognizes it. It's always the first thing, and things like that are always the first things to go when there is any pressure of money. But I think companies haven't thought fully about what return on investment of an assignment looks like. And a very basic principle in life is that happier people are generally more productive. So if you create a happy person, they're going to deliver more value for you. And I think if we can get to a way of understanding and calibrating objectively what the difference that makes, I think we'll be in a better place. And we'll have happier people who are better looked after. Everybody wins. Yeah,
thanks. Lucy, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Rob said. For us at Impact, for somebody to be at a stage of well-being, it means that they're physically well and they're emotionally well. And if anyone's familiar with any kind of coaching philosophy, one of the things that we talk about in transition coaching is we have the Fischer Curve. And we often talk about how a relocation is like a roller coaster. Well, this curve literally is like that. And at the start of an assignment, even when you're considering you're offered that post, the family is here. And there's all there's fears, anxiety, many of the stress points that Rob mentioned, you know, it's like, oh my goodness, what happens? Then at the very end of it, you've got, we're thriving, we're happy, we're settled, we're content, we're fulfilled, we are engaged, we are productive. But to get from this point to this point, and a relocation, it's like, whoop. And it's not even just up and down, sometimes it's back to front as well. So, you know, there's the physical side, there's changes in diet, changes in climate, all the physical reactions that you can have to stress. And of course, it's the emotional, it's homesickness, it's loneliness, it's fear, it's anxiety, it's loss of identity. I know, who am I in this new location, particularly for the accompanying family, accompanying partners, you know, they've given up a lot to be there, and you have to create this new sense of self in this alien environment. So for us, when both the employee, if it's a single assignee or an accompanying family household, when they get to that point that they're thriving, they are engaged, they're happy, that's when we can say they are in a state of physical and emotional well-being. And that's what it means to us, to me.
Thank you. Damian.
Yeah, if I'm thinking about well-being overall, I'm considering my health and my happiness, and obviously there's an obligation on your company to think about your health and your happiness whilst you're on an assignment. But we all know that the obvious things to think about when you're looking at the kind of practical elements of it are good sleep, good physical activity, avoiding too much alcohol and avoiding drugs, eating well and doing something you enjoy, obviously. And then if I think about how I've responded in the last 18 months to the world and how I've changed what my well-being significantly, I think about how I did more hiking, how I lost a stone in weight, how I was eating a little bit more adventurously, how I kept busy, how I love my garden, how I tuned into nature a lot more. I did a lot of self-help books. I did a lot of online learning. I lost a job and gained a job and found fulfillment in a new job, which has been a fantastic journey. And they've all made me really think about how important that well-being is to me. And when I was researching some of the stats on well-being, apparently 1 in 7 people globally have more mental or substance use disorders. So that's quite a significant number. And there was another survey that highlighted that in a survey of 50% of US expats, that they identified there was more risk of problems with anxiety and depression, which was 2.5 times more than their US-based counterparts. So I think that says a lot about who we're working with and who we're helping. And we know how that's going to be an increasing importance to everybody, not just companies and assignees, but to the world as a whole. So when I look back and think about my own wellness, there's so much to kind of talk about, and as Rob said, we could talk about that for ages. But you know, it's just so important and that's why we're having these conversations more and more frequently now. Yeah,
thank you, Damian. Yeah, I mean, most of us have joined so many online conferences, webinars with thought leaders, panels over the last year. As we often say, we're a bit zoomed out, and yes, we're doing another Zoom. But you know, what we noticed is that the trend and the discussions have really been heightened, that heightened awareness of the what we call duty of care for the employee and their family, and what we're calling household. We don't want to just say it's a family anymore. I think, just like all of you panelists already said, it's no longer, it's important that it's no longer an add-on, you know, like just a nice to have in policy. You know, we need to support the non-traditional moves. We need to become more agile when we're proposing services. We need to adjust to the unplanned. We need to plan for the unknown. And, you know, we need to make sure that we're flexible with each individual. So really the next question that I have for the panelists is, can you give concrete examples of changes that you've seen in the new global trends, the non-traditional, the flexible benefits, you know, all of that? that you've seen the last year and a half and what you believe it's going towards, or that we should as experts be proposing. Damian, do you want to start?
Yeah. COVID has certainly taught us how to be prepared for the unknown. So we're all very, very proactively thinking about it. And I think in companies, you know, we see that duty of care is being talked about. So there's definitely an increase in conversation, but importantly, there's an increase in spend allocation as well. I think if you look at what companies are spending on it, there's been a huge increase. And that's not just companies, but where we work in the health insurance space, we're seeing individuals that are increasing their coverage because they want to feel like they're being protected for their income protection or their life insurance or their health insurance. So we've definitely seen that increase. And I think for us, one of the things I've noticed definitely in the last few months, but since 2017, all of our policies cover mental health. And since every year, since that was set up, we've seen a significant increase in the take-up of people tapping into that part of their insurance package. That's no surprise, obviously, and that will continue to grow. But there's other areas where I talk about healthcare, where, for example, we're going to see a lot more of a virtual healthcare. So you'll be having video calls with your doctors, and there's more. We've certainly been involved in more home well-being. You can do online yoga. There was Joe Wicks doing exercise classes every morning for the school kids and everyone else. So I think there's be a lot more out there available to the wider world to tap into. But working with expats who are, you know, that not only do they have the fact that they're relocating to another country and they have the elements of missing their family and feeling lonely and all those other difficult elements of being an expat, but it really in their workplace, their companies really need to support them, and their policies need to be really, really clear. And I think companies are really looking at tightening up their policies. And when we look at remote working as well, we can see how that's evolved and how that's changing. And definitely more companies will move towards that hybrid model of offering that part of working in an office and then being able to work from home, obviously. So. And again, as a healthcare insurance provider, you know, you really need to have those policies in place. It goes without saying, you know, if you have the right cover in place, you pick things up early, which we all know how important that is. But B, if you're in a foreign country and you can't speak, you know, you're not speaking the mother tongue or the language, if you're stuck in a country where you can't have that communication, it's very, very daunting for you. So you need to have access to good doctors. You need to have access to medical evacuation. So all of these things are definitely on the table now. And as a business, we've seen the increase in those questions ongoingly. We'll see more of that as time goes on.
Thanks, Damian. Lucy, what changes have you seen?
Well, I think, you know, COVID threw up interesting scenarios for us working with the families once they were on the ground, because obviously when March, kind of April last year hit, we had split families. We had some families where the partner had moved and the family hadn't, and then there were visa issues and border closures, or there were families that literally moved and were in a service department and having to quarantine, didn't know how to get groceries, didn't know how to get anything, didn't have any resources, or those who'd been there for a couple of weeks but were really, you know, thrown in. They couldn't go back and see their families, even if they wanted to go back for a visit. So we spent a lot of last year really doing a lot of emotional coaching, and we adapted our coaching. We had to sort of go back to some of our clients to say, you know, okay, yeah, they haven't done their job search yet, and I know they were supposed to do a job search, but one, everyone's making redundancies, you know, two, it's COVID, so we've had to adapt the services. And fortunately, most of our clients have been like, yeah, just give them whatever they need, whatever support they need, give them. So that's been very good, but it has shifted for us. It's not changed the way that we coach, it's just we've been more mindful of the emphasis and the care and attention that people need. And I think the nice thing that we're seeing is that has extended now beyond and into this year, with companies recognizing that the normal channels and the normal processes for a lot of relocations has changed. Whether, you know, you can't do recce visits, or you can't get your visa, or you're having to remote work for 6 months because they're not letting you in. And, you know, we've got one example I can give you of a client we've only just started working with, who never really had any support for the family in policy at all. And they got in touch with us end of April, beginning of May. They had a family of 5 moving from Bogota to Moscow no recce visit because they weren't able to do it. The kids didn't have places in schools yet. They landed into Moscow 3 o'clock in the morning, went into a serviced accommodation that wasn't properly kitted out for a family of 5, like 3 spoons, 2 cups, and, you know, couldn't speak the language, stuck in quarantine. And literally the company phoned us and said, what can you do? You know, we really need to help them. And obviously it would have been nice to have had that before they landed. But I think they're a good example of companies being a lot more open and saying, we need help. How can you help us? We've been allowed to and able to have a lot more policy-based conversations with our clients to say, okay, this is the help that we can offer, and it is available and it's not terribly expensive, but this is, you know, the change that it can make is massive. And I think another change, thinking about the trends, Tracy mentioned it, but it's the idea of the slowly changing language and terminology away from the spouse partner. Thankfully, trailing spouse is a thing of the past in most cases, but it still lingers. But we're now seeing it more to accompanying talent and household support. And it's moving away from it all just being seen as a tick box exercise. Oh yeah, we offer spouse support, we'll give you 4 coaching sessions to help you find a job. More to actually, we need a more holistic approach because we want to encourage our employees to take up these assignments. We recognize that it's a very difficult economic and job search climate. We need to do more to encourage. So I think we're slowly seeing glimmering signs that we're coming out of the dark ages of all of these soft services seen as nice and fluffy and not really very important, to starting to see that shift to them being more business critical. And it's lovely to be able to have those conversations and start to really push it to the forefront where it should be.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, I've thought about this question a lot whilst I was listening to Damian and Lucy, and I'm not sure that we can truly tell what the trends are right now, simply because it's a bit like trying to predict an election from the exit polls, because we're still in the pandemic and it's not over yet. And, you know, talking to many people, you know, they're looking at, you know, peak number 4 or wave number 4 hitting. I think a lot of the things that people were talking about before the pandemic was around technology. It was about, you know, people being more flexible in working. And I think that the pandemic has focused some of the conversations around some of that quite strongly. What I think it has done is that it's polarized companies. I think there are companies that have truly embraced well-being and the holistic nature of looking after the whole person as part of them, because they feel a responsibility as an organization. And there are other companies that sadly treat their employees like commodities. And I don't think they're ever going to be the kinds of companies that will think more holistically about that. And we shouldn't expect them to, because that's not probably in their nature or their DNA. I think what the thing that has changed the most for me, and I think Lucy alluded to that, is that people are now more open to talk about and even say the word mental health without some of the stigma that's generally historically been attached to it, and people's fear of actually saying, actually I have an issue, and it's not, you know, it's not I have a cold or I have a flu, it's actually I'm actually stressed out by this, or I'm not coping very well with this. And it's interesting, you know, quoting some of the statistics that we've looked at as part of our research, men generally have been historically much more open about talking about their mental health as an employee than women. And I think that's because of some of the baggage that women carry around in the workplace, as well as trying to kind of battle in that workspace, and then suddenly to bring in a mental health issue on top of that would mean that they probably kind of, you know, erode their position in the organization. So I think, you know, the best thing for me in all of this, you know, if we have to take some silver linings out of what has been, you know, a horrific time for the world, and, you know, sadly so many millions of souls lost, is that we are now more open. And, you know, even now conversations like this one start with, how are you feeling? Has everything okay? How's the family doing? Not necessarily the same way that conversations would have started 18 months ago. So I think that's, you know, really, really positive.
No, I think that is such a good point, Rob, you know, that we see you know, we're working from home, we see a dog, we see a cat, we have casual clothes on, we're more vulnerable already as it is. And so I think that the barriers for the executive team, for decision makers within a company are more open in a way. You know, we need to take that opportunity.
Yeah.
I think for me, because I'm sat in a shed at the end of my garden and I don't see people, I'm ringing up people a lot more proactively and having more conversations, and not just with friends, but with business contacts as well. And I've spoken to more people in the last year than I can ever remember speaking to. And I think that's part of me dealing with my own mental health and well-being, is being able to do that has been invaluable. And I've really actually enjoyed it.
Well,
And you do have a super shed. If that's your shed, frankly, I'm impressed. Nothing like my shed looks like.
mine either.
Not the usual shed.
So, you know, you have all touched on this a little bit, but we're hearing more and more about this need for flexibility and choice. You know, the core flex benefits versus lump sum, you know, the not the tier 2 status, or better yet, that cash or service. You know, that's not what we want anymore. And something that in our discussion, our pre-discussion before this panel, you know, we kept talking about the fact that here we are, global mobility experts in whatever field it is. We are the ones who should be going with the company and giving our best, the best practices really for policies. So I'd like to ask the panelists, you know, as experts in mobility, what should we be advising our clients to include in their policy? You know, how can we help them use these well-being services to help DSPs not having to add to their 1 or 2 day home search, for example. You know, these soft services, these well-being services are already in the mobility industry. And so how can we better advise?
I think, I mean, I particularly like that question, and I like this topic, because I think in the research that we've done and the conversations that I've had, you know, we've tried to look not just at an assignee or a corporation, but we've tried to look at the whole family that's relocating. And a lot of the research that we did for our first wellness paper embraced, and we had consultants or counselors talking to the whole family, including kids, you know, teenagers who were relocating. And the one thing that struck me, and it struck me again and again over the last 18 months, that some of the smartest individuals, some of the most intuitive and innovative ideas that I've heard in the relocation industry haven't come from corporate clients, haven't come from established mobility professionals, haven't even come from assignees. Most of them have come from the accompanying partner, who sadly still remains mostly women, who have amazing ideas about how they could do things better, because, you know, they're organizing all of this stuff anyway. They know what they're doing. You know, they've got brilliant brains for this kind of stuff, and actually can do things and saying, well, don't spend all that money on me there, because I don't need that. Actually spend half of it on me over here, and that would be really helpful to us. And I think, you know, whether it's the relocation management companies or the relocation providers that don't want to then take that information and share it with the corporate because it's challenging and creates a difficult conversation. But actually, if we listened to our end user customer and took that advice and used it to talk to our chooser customer, then actually we may get into a better situation. And I think, you know, taking money out of it, it's not always all about the money. It's about making good choices. And I think, you know, a lot of people that relocate think they know a lot. And one of the really interesting facts that came out of our original research was that the people that were moving for the second, third or fourth times generally found it tougher than the first time, because everybody said to them, you've done this before, you know what you're doing, you don't need any help. And it actually was the second and the third moves when they really, really needed the help, but nobody was prepared to give it to them. And so you need to listen to this kind of stuff and, you know, make sure that those families are happy and do get what they need to support them through that journey. And I know I could talk forever on this point, but I was listening to a story from a young girl who'd moved out of Brazil at the age of 8 and had been relocated around the world with her family and then ended up in New York, and at some point said, you know what, family's going home to Brazil. The now teenage daughter said, ain't home to me because I haven't lived there since I'm 8 and I don't even speak Portuguese anymore. And nobody would think about how they would support that family and that particular member of the family as a repatriation to their home location. So I think we have to broaden our horizons. I think we have to be more open to listening and also then using the information that we get from those conversations to create a bespoke package within the confines of what the policy says that's unique for that set of individuals in that family.
Right, instead of cash.
Instead of cash. I mean, what human beings will do with cash, what human beings will spend it on what they want, not what they need.
Vacation, couch, then they'll be depressed on the couch.
Boat.
Yeah, Lucy.
Yeah, I just totally agree with everything that Rob just said. And I think our favourite policies are the clients that we love are the ones that will say, okay, this is the budget that they have for these services. You consult with them, you have the conversation, and then deliver what they need within that. And then that's perfect, because sometimes we get an authorization with somebody, oh yeah, they need career service. And for whatever reason, they don't want a job search. They might have small children. They might want to take a career break. Then for a whole multitude of reasons, they don't. And then we have to go back permission and say, can we give them integration training? Can we give them career continuation? Can we give them cultural training? You know, what else can we do? Whereas, you know, otherwise we're in a situation where we've got something that's been offered and we have to give that, and it's not necessarily what they need. So flexibility is great. And I would just say that if you have that conversation, you have the opportunity to speak to the client and form the policy, you know, allow them, don't just dictate, you're moving here, so you have to have that. Yes, there are certain things they must have, but there are other things that, you know, you can really tailor to give them the specific things that they need. And as well, just to again touch on something Rob said, it's like they don't know what they don't know. And I think you've got to be able to fully explain what these benefits are, because sometimes as well, don't forget, we use language and terminology, you know, household goods or spouse partner support or whatever it might be, and we know what it is. But if you've never relocated before, you might not fully know what that is. And even, I have to say, even people within the relocation industry, Tracy and I spend a lot of time training RMCs and DSPs about what actually the services that we provide, what spouse partner, career coaching and cultural training and integration is. And if we, the industry experts, don't know it, then how are these assignees going to know it? So I think there has to be that conversation and there has to be that introduction so that they're aware of what they need, and definitely not lump sum. Don't give them the cash. I think they use it or lose it, where you've got a budget for those services at best. And we can give you an example of a very well-known technology firm that we work with, that a few years back we were called into their London office because they had a new London office. They'd had a group move of quite a lot of people into this office, and spouse partner support is in policy, but for whatever reason they weren't being told about it. It wasn't being sold effectively, and they were using the money for other things. And then 6 months later, lots of complaints at HR. My partner, my girlfriend can't find a job. My husband can't find a job. He's, you know, what do we do? What do we do? And we thought we had this in policy. It's like, yeah, you do have it in policy, but you haven't made it either a core service or you haven't explained it properly. And they've used their budget on other things. So I think, you know, that's really important. And just one final thing on that, I think there's a lot of talk obviously about technology and the platforms, and you've got these wonderful platforms where people can manage their own relocation. And I'm not a technophobe, you know, but I do think we need to be careful that just giving somebody a password and log onto a platform isn't necessarily the best thing for them. They still need that you know, advice and support. And it has to be that blended approach of the expertise of you as the relocation consultant or the specialist expert and the technology that will provide the best solution, not just relying on the tech to do it, or relying on somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing as well. So I think these are all things that we need to be making sure that, you know, yes, integration support, career support, cultural training, school search, all of those sorts of things are on offer, but they're also properly available and explained.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I think something else that we really wanted to bring up in this panel was that the mobility industry is being asked to support more and more the organization's strategies, and diversity and inclusion is one of those strategies. Talent retention is another very important part of what companies are asking mobility for, reorganizations, local hire initiations, you know, so, and also supporting that virtual assignment. So we have a big, huge task ahead of us. Lucy, I'm gonna ask you, you know, what impact does well-being and the support services have on talent retention and that diversity and inclusion and retaining the diverse talent more specifically?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I'm probably preaching to the choir on this one, because I think we probably all know, you know, the importance and the correlation between employee well-being and taking care of them and the retention. You know, it's a no-brainer. You give somebody all the support and the support resources, look after the family, versus dumping somebody in a country with goods and a key. You know, you can see which one is going to be more successful. And actually, I've got a really good example about this. Last week, I needed to have a change of scenery, so I took my laptop and I worked in my gym, in the cafe in the gym, and got chatting to the gentleman next to me, and he said, "Oh, so what do you do?" And I was explaining what I do, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I understand that." And it turns out he runs his own business. A few years back, had this high flyer, real star, and they had a subsidiary company in the US, and he wanted him and his family to go over, run the subsidiary. You know, it was all succession planning. It was all going to be marvelous. They said, "We already had a house in the States, so we thought, oh, we'll just move the family there. It's perfect." Well, this house was in a very dodgy neighborhood, nowhere near any schools, nowhere near any kind of international community. They gave them no support. They literally shipped over their goods and gave them a front door key. And surprise, surprise, 6 months later, this high flyer is back in the UK working at a competitor. And this guy lost $500,000 and one of his star employees. So, I mean, I'm just like, ding, ding, that is a perfect example of how not taking proper care of the employees during the assignment can really mess up the talent. And, you know, although global mobility has changed, the key drivers of that haven't, you know, the recognition of the skills and experience that it gives the employee and the depth that then the company gets from that. Why would you invest in sending somebody abroad and then not invest a tiny amount on top on giving them that support and everything that they need for them to be successful, productive, engaged in there, and take care of their family as well? So it's huge for retention and also for diversity as well. And I think we all know that the state, particularly of women in global mobility, I mean, it's been woeful for a long time. We've done panels on this and had conversations about it for years, and it's obviously been well publicised that the effect that COVID has had on women in the workplace, especially, they paid the higher price and they're dropping out to take care of the family and the children. So the burden on them has been a lot, but there is so much that global mobility could do to address that, simply by incorporating a few additional policies. You know, let's say for females, so women going abroad, if you've got a single woman, well, if you have support in policy, why does it have to be a boyfriend or a girlfriend? You know, households come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. So if you've got a single woman and female employee who wants to go move abroad but is reluctant to go on their own, well, can they take a cousin, a friend, a roommate? You know, broadening out that policy description so it's not so narrow means that they can have those services and those opportunity and the confidence to go abroad and take that assignment and do it well and really get a lot from it and give back to the company. So it's a golden opportunity for us in mobility to really be pushing that and helping. And it's not just about women as well, it's people with disabilities. You know, can you take a carer, or if you're a single father, can you take a grandparent who's going to help come and take care of the children? Or if you've got somebody who's slightly neurodiverse, can they take somebody that can help them assimilate and deal with all of those things? If we just have a little bit more imagination and a little bit more confidence to talk about the support that we can offer them, I think we can make such a difference to both talent retention and diversity. And now is the real time that it'd be great to be having more of those conversations.
Thanks. Damian, with regards to the results of the survey that William Russell conducted in May this year, you know, how do expats feel that their organizations are supporting them?
Yeah, it was a recent survey of 1,200 expats. They were in Australia, UK, the US, UAE, and Australia. I said Australia, so 5 countries. 50% were male and female, so it's quite a good balance. And then 41% were aged between 25 and 39. So I think what the survey results show us is that there's some interesting food for thought. So, and you mentioned the AXA, one of the AXA results earlier. Our survey actually picked up a significant number with a bigger increase than that, which was 38% of our people who surveyed felt that their mental health has deteriorated since COVID, and that's quite a big number. So that's one of those numbers that we need to think about, how there's a hell of a lot more to do here. And then I think taking the sickness element out of COVID, and I think how we think about how lockdowns and closed borders have definitely come with their benefits, but of course people have missed seeing their families, so that's had a big impact on people. And then one of the other results was that 44% of people actually preferred to have been in their home country during the pandemic. So whether you think that's a high figure or a low figure, and there'll be reasons as to why people would say that, but it's interesting to know. And then we've also got evidence of a definite decline in mental health over the last 18 months, because even though 22% of people said their mental health had improved, most people obviously are feeling that that's not the case. So where people need to tap into those services, they're not really sure where their support is or how they can get it, which is a worry. But they need to be better, as Lucy kind of alluded to earlier, they need to be told how they can get that support and where they get it from. And I think there's a general perception from the expats themselves that there is a lack of support. So they're looking for a bit more help here. And again, Rob kind of alluded to this earlier as well with the stigma. One of the things that we found is that even mental health in UAE and Singapore is still quite a stigma, whereas so in the UK and the US it's slightly better. But again, there's still a lot more work to do around that. So it's interesting to see how expats are feeling now and what they're actually thinking, because that will hopefully then mold some of these programs and changes that we'll hopefully see.
Yeah. Can I ask you one further question about that? You know, with this healthcare and well-being being bumped up the agenda in corporates, what changes have you noticed from companies and clients about the solutions that they're actually offering?
Well, yeah, so that's a question that we're being asked a lot more proactively. So expats are looking at their personal health care insurance, their income protection and their life insurance policies a lot more closely than historically they had been. People are topping up their policies. So even if you're relocating and you're part of a global insurance plan provider for your healthcare, people are still topping that up now more proactively than they ever were, because they want to have the right level of coverage. And that's not only for the individuals, but that's for the companies as well. So there's definitely more of the, even though we recognize that relocation has been impacted significantly and relocations are down, we've definitely been hearing about the number of HR people that are actually asking their RMCs for help and input on how they get healthcare insurance.
Right.
They historically, they haven't really raised that, but now it's definitely becoming more of a proactive question. So I think also the sensible relocation companies are really offering the extra services to their clients, because lots of their clients may not even know that these services exist. But if they're offering it, and if they're able to make a bit of extra revenue off the back of it, even better. But at least to be offering the services, these ancillary services out there, then and that's where we're starting to definitely have more and more of those conversations with not only the HR people, but also the relocation industry as well.
Rob, any extra thoughts on supporting the talent retention and the diversity and inclusion?
Well, I mean, I think it's a given. And I think, one of the challenges that we face, our policies are written typically around an individual, a bit like, how clothing companies size clothes based on a model. If you don't fit that model exactly, those clothes are never going to fit you. And I think the same is true with policies. And if we are talking about an increase in diversity and inclusiveness, do most policies take account of people who have disabilities of any description? Probably not. So then you have to start working on exceptions. And I think that then flows back into the, what are my core responsibilities from a compliance perspective, things that I absolutely must do from a business, keeping my business whole. And then what do I do with the rest of the stuff that then that's where we talk about core and flex, right? It's the core things that I have to do because I'm physically bound to do those things. But now can I be flexible with the rest to create a program that allows me to kind of move around within my employee base to deliver the right solution, and ultimately this is all designed around one thing, right? It's designed around having an employee happy and productive at their new place of work, delivering to the objectives of that assignment and delivering the return on investment. And I think that's where the biggest challenge in all of this lies, to be honest with you.
Perfect segue, Rob. Let's talk about ROI. You touched on it a little bit, but a lot of the discussions that we hear, especially with partner support, is it's a soft service. There's no, we can't prove the return on investment. How do we prove it? Prove it to me and we'll add it into policy, almost, is what we're hearing very often. And I think, again, this is an opportunity to really show just how much ROI there is in adding these well-being and wellness, well-being in policy, services. So Dom, maybe with your experience with Euro, you've been in all these panels, can we measure the success of a move? That engagement, retention, productivity as a global mobility professional.
There are so many different perspectives on that. And certainly when you talk to our colleagues, in other associations, CERC and WRC, that this is kind of the holy grail of the associations, to try and actually point out that, the return on investment is dependent on so many other factors than productivity. But productivity ultimately is what is going to lead to a return on the investment. But if you look at something like, everything that you've said just highlights how important this is. And I think from the point of view of the associations, it's really important that we stop as an industry seeing this stuff as soft. It is not soft. I mean, I was talking to John Harmon, and he did the closing for us on the spring session, and quite a lot of the stuff that came out of the spring sessions are things that we're going to explore further. And I'd really like to do the same with this, and we can talk about that in a minute. But John, in his closing, made the point that, this has been really hard. And when somebody is going through the experience of a relocation, there is a temptation. There's a thing called the phenomenological field, which is that your perception is your perception of what's going on in your life. So it might be quite easy for you as somebody in a privileged position, in a role, or in the household of somebody in a privileged position who's been moved to Paris and is living in a beautiful apartment somewhere in, the 6th. And you think to yourself, this is really hard on me. I'm finding this a real struggle, but I shouldn't, because look at the privileged position that I'm in. That privileged position doesn't change the fact that you feel how you feel.
Yeah.
That, what's going on with the family doesn't change just because you have money and status. So from my point of view, it's really important for corporations to see that they have a moral duty to somebody's mental health. And it's not just the person they are paying, it's the other people who are surrounding that person. So if as an association we can do something in terms of research or education or MIM training that can bring this, because obviously as an association we're looking at providers.
Yeah.
So it's educating the providers to go back up the line to educate the policymakers.
I love it. Love it. Rob?
Yeah, I think this is kind of the nub of the argument in all of this stuff, unfortunately, is that, you know, you hear from people in mobility within corporates that they want a seat at the strategic table. And typically, to be at the strategy end of a business, you need to be able to talk in a commercial environment. You need numbers, hard facts, data. That's what gives you a seat at the strategic table, because CEOs and CFOs make decisions, business decisions, commercial decisions based on numbers. It's an unassailable fact. The problem is that a lot of what we talk about, and we may decry the fact that people call it soft. I had somebody describe it to me the other day as fluffy. The reality is there isn't a lot of data that you can extrapolate to say, if you do X, you will get Y as a result. You know, I can say, if I buy this piece of machinery and I plug it in here, I'll take, instead of producing 12 widgets, I'll produce 25 widgets and I'll reduce the cost by X. I can buy that as a CFO or a CEO. I'm going to go, yeah, I get that I can see that improves my bottom line. It's very hard to do it here. And we are our own worst enemies. This business is its own worst enemy because we do not share information. We hold information like it's some secret source that nobody should know about. And, you know, I think, and the associations, whether it's, and, you know, I've seen greater collaboration between EURA and ERC and WCA since the pandemic than I probably saw previously. And I think it should be also part of your responsibility to start dealing with your members, whether they're RMCs and destination services provider, in collating some of that data so we can objectify some of what the results of providing these softer skill or softer services look like. Because ultimately, I was reading some research that Deloitte did, and it was purely based in the UK, and they were looking at well-being in the workplace, and they felt that through, and I think they interviewed 850 companies, but on the basis of that and whatever algorithm they used to calculate the numbers, they said that UK businesses lost £47 billion a year through poor well-being in the workplace, and that for every £1 spent on well-being, reduced that total by 5. So clearly there is some logic, there must be some logic in there that we can use, because that's the only argument that ever anybody uses. And, you know, I've talked to the guys at Impact Group over a long time. You know, the biggest argument that ever comes back from a company is, well, you know, we don't want to spend the money on that. I mean, it's important. Well, why is it important? Well, because of this, this, and this. Well, give me the numbers. And you can't, you know, you just have to rely on people's imagination and forward thinking. And there are a lot of forward thinking companies out there that do understand the relationship between well-being and productivity and happiness and the contagiousness of the happiness of that individual in the rest of the environment. But it's really hard.
I think there's two companies that don't. I was again, that AXA report that we referred to earlier, it said that only 1/3 of companies offer any kind of benefit to their families, their international assignees and their families. When they're relocating, that's 1/3 of companies, only 1/3 offer it to all that. And so you think, well, what are the rest of them doing? You know, you should be, it should be intrinsic. And I get frustrated. Sometimes we get inquiries from RMCs, oh, can we get support? Can you give me a quote for support in this country or this place? I'm like, yes, absolutely. And the amount of times it comes back to say it wasn't approved, client didn't approve it. And you think this is minuscule. You know, our program starts at $1,500. It's such small investment for such a massive return. But you're right, Rob, that it's trying to get that across that it's not fluffy, it's not soft, it's essential.
And you know what, that $1,500, if you take the total cost of an assignee, that $1,500 represents 0.01% of their total expenditure. It's a drip in the, I mean, they won't even miss it. And frankly, I've seen companies spend 10 times that trying to put right problems that they could have solved in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm aware that we have 5 more minutes left, and I do want to ask that last question, but Damian, do you have one last thought on return of investment? Or
yeah, just really quickly, for me, I think actually it's about what happens at the end of the assignment, because I think that's when you gauge the ultimate success of how the assignment has been. Did they successfully meet the requirements of what they were supposed to do, and were they adequately supported? Were they happy? Did they enjoy it? Did they grow? Was it a positive experience? And I think, you know, even asking ourselves as a service industry, what could we have done better to help them or make it better for them? But importantly, when they go back home or they're repatriated, you know, what's next? And we all hear about how that when they go back, they potentially leave their company. How do we make sure, you know, how do you make sure that's not happening? And I think that's a really important part of the ROI question, is to really think about that bit, because it's all well and good to talk about whilst they're on assignment, but the bit that comes at the, ultimately, we'll know it's going to come to the end of the assignment. That's really important to talk about that as well.
Oh, we started working with a company in Zurich because they were losing 20% of their talent within 3 years of them moving to Zurich. Yeah. And it was all due to family issues.
Yeah, you hear that all the time, don't you?
It was a number for them. Yeah. It was like, help, we need to do something. So it is a reality. Okay, I am just really aware of time. I hope we can go a little over. I just wanted to hear from, you know, you, Dom, really listening to all of this whole conversation. You know, how can we gather more stats on this, information for all of us providers, you know, to really have tools? Because I do think that this coming year, companies are listening a little bit more to that duty of care. I think after this pandemic, this is the time for us experts and subject matter experts in the industry to come with our best practices.
Look, I totally agree. And I think going back to what Rob said, you know, data is absolutely key. And this is what we are lacking. You know, we're swimming in these waters and we all know this. We all know this as a topic. We all know the value of this. But like you say, it's the proving it. So, I mean, I'm, you know, I've been banging on about that
yes.
years, right? And one thing that I hope comes out of COVID is that those companies who acted well, the companies who did take duty of care seriously, the companies who responded properly, will be the ones that all of us as consumers will support. So if you take retail or you take travel, I mean, there have been some companies which acted really badly over COVID, and there have been ones which acted really well. But you know, that again, that's our purchasing power. You know, if you there must be something that we can incorporate, particularly in something like the EGQS or on a global scale into an ISO. Why isn't there a wellness index in there? Why isn't there a wellness policy in those documents when you have sustainability and you have health and safety and you have, you know, all of the other very valuable policies that are there? Where is that? And then how is it measured? You know, what metrics are you looking at to be able to measure it? I think from the point of view of the associations, this is big data that we need. And so we can provide it from the point of view of the providers, but we can't provide it from the point of view of the corporates. That is something that we need to do in collaboration with WRC, CRC, and other bodies around the world. And that's definitely something that's been spoken about. And those conversations need to go forward. It's a great shame that we have not had the physical, but on the one hand, this has become such a hot topic because we haven't been able to be all together. But you know, the next opportunities that we have to actually gather as an industry, these are the topics that are seriously key. And by that time, we need some data. We really do.
And I think those companies that have been very good with change in this last year and a half, I think they're the ones that will succeed. The people that have been change resistant and fighting it and trying to stick to their old fashioned way of doing business, they'll be the ones that will see the problem. So I think embracing that change has been really important and really interesting to watch how people have done it as well.
It's even a generation issue. That's
Yeah.
a topic. Rob, any last thoughts, especially as an RMC?
Yeah, I think we need to be more fearless. I think we need to be more fearless in the way that we approach all of our relationships, whether it's with our partners, whether it's with our corporate clients, whether it's with assignees. I think we need to be brave enough to challenge our clients. If we know and we believe that this is the right thing for the family that we're looking after, then we should be brave enough to have a proper discussion with our client and not fear that we're going to get fired because we asked them a difficult question. I don't think that that's how most clients would think about that, but we as an industry seem to have kind of got this stigma around, oh, I don't want to say anything to upset my client because they may fire us. I think as partners of RMCs, we need to be more fearless and brave to say, actually, I know this about this family and this is a really important thing. And if we don't do something about this, this is going to be a challenge for them. I think we have to be respectful of the positions that we all have within the eco-structure of this, and that, you know, you can be fearless to the point where you become aggressive. That's probably too much. But I think, you know, this is really about collaboration. And I think the one thing that I've seen probably more of as a result of the pandemic is an openness to collaboration. And if we collaboratively think about ourselves as a team, we all have our roles within a team, whether we're, you know, thinking about the football later tonight for if you're an England or Scotland fan, but, you know, whether you're a striker or a goalkeeper or a defender or a midfielder or a wing, you have your role, right? And the team will not operate if half of those players are in the wrong position or doing the wrong thing. So if you put your striker in goal and your attacker in the other position, then, you know, chances are you're going to let in more goals and not score as many. And I think we need to be stronger as a team, working together for the benefit of our ultimate end user, which is the assignee.
Yeah, thanks. Time is up. Dom, back to you.
Definitely. Listen, Tracy, Lucy, Damian, Rob, that was a brilliant session. We do need to work on some further stuff. You know, we need to work on putting something into the academy, making sure that that's free to access for people. So we'll be talking about that. I'd really, really like to get moving on something like that. Really great session. Thank you so much for putting this together. Let's not let this drop off the agenda, shall we? Make sure this stays where we believe it should be. So we really hope that we'll be able to run an in-person event in September in London. We have no idea, but we really hope so. I'd like to put this on the agenda for that. Clearly, we'll have it on the agenda for Seville and going forward with the We Can project with WRC and CRC as well. So thank you for keeping this at the top of the agenda and for all your brilliant insights. It's been great. For everybody watching, obviously this has been recorded. I'll get this up onto YouTube over the weekend. So it will be available on demand next week. Share it, give it to people, make sure this message gets spread amongst our brilliant industry. And in the meantime, great to see you all. Thank you everybody for being with us today and have a great weekend. I'm not very good at that, but yeah, have a great weekend. Bye, everybody.
I've been practicing a lot.